Hello, and welcome to our Spotlight series where we feature interviews with some of the organizations and experts that are mentioned on our website. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Cooper Davis from Inner Compass. Welcome, Cooper. So tell me about Inner Compass. What exactly does it do?
Well, we do a few different things, but I think the place we show up in most people's lives is about not just the drugs, but also understanding where a lot of these psychiatric diagnoses come from, how things like how to read an FDA drug label, just sort of offering in plain language for folks a lot of the basic information that I think a lot of us should have and don't always have if we want to make a fully informed choice. The decision to start or to stop a psychiatric drug is actually a pretty big one. And I won't say that all clinicians don't treat it with the gravity it deserves, but I think there's a fair number, and certainly patients are not necessarily. It's so normalized to sort of like go on or come off these drugs, oftentimes without even having a diagnosis, that we try to make sure that we can do whatever we can to provide for free everything somebody might need to know in order to make as formed as possible a choice. There's not a lot of widespread recognition, certainly sort of in establishment psychiatric clinical practice, that withdrawal is real and actually quite prevalent and can be quite severe. Um, and so in the absence of, people having access to clinical resources that can help them with the choice of coming off of a drug, we provide all kinds of information, most of which originates among the sort of layperson withdrawal community. And we've tried to sort of pull that information out and present it in ways that are really accessible, easy to understand, and really give people a sense for what that process can be like. So we offer not just this written information, a tapering companion guide, all of that, but we also operate a what we call the Inner Compass Exchange, which is a community. It's a mutual aid community where people at all stages, of this process and with all different types of relationships to psychiatric drugs and drug treatment, can find each other and sort of share their experience, strength, and hope. And this is what worked for me, and this is what didn't. And we're not the only place that on the internet that offers that kind of community space, but I think that we go out of our way to try and curate that space and make sure that it hangs on to a positive vision for the future.
What are the mechanics of that? How does that actually work? Is that do they exchange emails, or is there a sort of group
Oh,
chat group,
sure.
or how does that work?
So there's a few things that make us different from, say, the Facebook groups or the other forums you might find. One of them is it's private. Another is you're not required to share your full name. You're not supposed to. You don't need to give everybody your whole biography, but we do prefer that people use at least their first name and sort of show up as they are, because anonymity can be corrosive to building trust in a community. We also are. We learned early on at the beginning when we first launched, we were completely free. And what we found is that people were joining who were really, really not committed or not taking it seriously or not sort of aligned philosophically. And it caused an enormous amount of unnecessary strife. But of course, we want to make sure it's accessible to anybody who needs this community space. So when you go to exchange.theinnercompass.org, you're asked to either sign up for a plan, and the basic plan is $30 a month is the suggested donation that we ask for those who cannot, who don't have access to that kind of funding, which is a lot of people in our community. There's a link there, and you can just write in and request a scholarship. And everybody who asks gets one. And the only thing we ask in return is if your status does change and you are able to afford, $30 a month, that helps to offset to the nonprofit the cost of running this thing. And it also helps to subsidize other people who might be in a more difficult spot. And then you just make a profile like you would almost on any other social media network. You have feeds, you can chit chat with folks. Um, one way we describe this to people is, if you're looking to show up someplace and have somebody really hold your hand and tell you exactly what to do, this is not the place for you. But if you want to show up someplace and, you know, even no matter how difficult a time you're having, I think we at Inner Compass believe you always have something really valuable to offer other people. And even if that's just, sharing what you're going through on a really difficult day, there's somebody else out there who's in a similar place, and just hearing that you're there too can have an enormous impact on their day, their week, their month. And so the Inner Compass Exchange is really about is we want to give you the tools and the opportunity and the encouragement and the container to show up and sort of be of service to others in this very particular context. And that can include, we have a number of community members who have started different regular Zoom calls. So people get on, I think there might be one today for specifically people tapering antipsychotics. There's calls for people who are past their taper. And now it's like, well, now what do I do? Right? Because this thing that took up all my attention and care is now over. And I feel kind of okay. So now what? There's a call dedicated to that running right now. We have family members. If you are a caregiver or supporter to somebody going through this experience, tapering and withdrawal, that itself can be an enormously isolating and difficult experience. So we also try and offer specialized opportunities for them. So really, it's quite flexible. If people show up and they feel moved and they feel that, they have something to offer, or think there's, all the time you hear people say, what should exist? There should be a this. We want to say, yeah, great, you do it. We'll give you everything you need, you know? And we found that enormously effective and a great way for people to sort of pay it forward, and this sort of like chain reaction of giving.
Wow, I mean, that sounds like such an important resource that you're giving people, because it can be such a lonely process, can't it, coming off the drugs?
Enormously.
How great do you think this problem is of people suffering from side effects of psychiatric drugs?
The size of the problem is definitely under-acknowledged in the mainstream. I think most people who have experienced a significant psychiatric drug harm, or say adverse event, whatever terminology you want to use. I think most people who've experienced something like that at this particular moment still believe that was likely a symptom of their mental disorder and not a symptom or a sign of an effect of the drug.
Is Inner Compass also involved with helping people who haven't actually begun taking psychiatric drugs to understand the risks?
Actually pretty passionate about what we call the sort of like upstream population. And this is true for a lot of communities and situations like this one, where most people don't find out what they needed to know to avoid the problem until they already have the problem. And that's when they go online and start searching around, and they're actually have the search terms that they need to figure out what's going on. So increasingly, we are finding there's more and more interest in people who have not, especially parents. Parents are getting much more curious, and they're seeking out information ahead of time. And I think part of that is, more and more people's stories are getting out there. But really, I think that is kind of the most important population or demographic to get this information to. And the way I think of it is, I look at, the initial conversation that I had that led me to starting on drug treatment which was you had the doctor, you had me, and you had my mom, right, sitting in the office. And our goal at Intercompass is that one of those three people has some sense of how this can go badly, right? By the time you're all sitting there discussing the pros and cons. I think getting to those different people is three totally different pathways, right? They're all pulling from very different sort of information ecosystems. And we're always trying to find different ways to get, to get to each of those different folks. But it is hard. People don't, especially when, I'll just say this, when I was a poster child for stimulant drug treatment. I went from a C student to an A student literally overnight. I was unsure if I was going to even get into go to college. I ended up getting into the school of my choice. I was pursuing the career of my choice. Like, sort of all the things that it says on the tin actually sort of happened for me. However, if I played the tape through all the way to where sort of that chain of events took me. I don't know if it was necessary. It's impossible to say, was it worth it or was it not? But I do know that even if I had all the information that we offered Intercompass at the time that I was first engaging treatment, or if my doctor prescriber had, or my mom or whoever else was involved, I think it would have saved me a lot of misery because I would have had a much better sense of what to look out for, and also how to understand my own experience through the lens of maybe other people who had been down this road themselves. And actually, the other thing I would pitch here is we're doing a conference this year in December in West Hartford, Connecticut. There's still tickets available. This will be our first inaugural conference. We've done events before, but this is a proper conference. And I'm really proud of the range of speakers and panelists that we've got, as well as the people who are buying tickets and showing up to this thing, truly coming from all walks of life. And I've been to other conferences sort of in this general space in the past. I can say that this objectively is different. And I think there's something new happening across our culture where people are waking up and asking questions about this stuff in a new way. But let's keep that conversation as broad as possible, right? And not, cut ourselves off from what could be huge new sources of support and fellowship.
Cooper, tell me, how can people find Intercompass, and how can they find out about your conference?
If you go to theinnercompass.org, you can see right at the top, we've got a banner. Join us this December. We're bringing together patients, clinicians, researchers, and advocates to reimagine the future of mental health at Intercompass Initiative's inaugural conference and gala. And there's a button you can learn more. There's a button you can donate to us, which we love. Any amount, especially recurring. Our best donors are giving us like $10 a month, and it makes an enormous difference.
Thank you so much, Cooper, not just for this talk, but for all the work that you are doing for people who are suffering from psychiatric drug harm. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Katinka.